Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast, Thursday night live, coming at you. Nathan King here with Jason Caldwell, presented by AU Club. So thank you so much to them for being the sponsor of our show here, going back to football season. Only one game left in the basketball season. Only one game left in the regular season basketball campaign for this Auburn team. It's been a grind. It's obviously been a really long campaign for this team where you're playing basically tournament teams night in and night out. Jason, I was watching the Alabama-Florida game, and Jay Billis made a good point. He said, some of these SEC teams are probably ready to get in the tournament so they don't have to play like Tennessee and Ole Miss and Florida every single game. It'll be a bit of a relief at that point. But Auburn's got one more here at the end of the regular season against a very, very good team. They're going to go for the season sweep over Alabama. But before we get into that one, Jason, a tough result for Auburn on Tuesday against Texas A&M. Not necessarily the most surprising performance in the world when you talk about coming from a short turnaround Saturday to Tuesday. And you and I have talked about it. Bruce Pearl's talked about it. Texas A&M, if you had told me Auburn's going to have two SEC losses, I would have said Florida and Texas A&M. It's bad matchup for them, and but it did. You don't want to excuse a loss entirely. It did point to some issues and some things that Auburn can certainly clean up, even though they're the best team in the country.
Correct. First, it was the perfect storm, in my opinion. You had a tough matchup, first of all, and you got to give Texas A&M credit. Like that's a game you look at, and Bruce Pearl against his teams have struggled historically, but because of the way they play, and they do a great job of attacking and being really aggressive on the glass, and Florida kind of does the same thing. They just did it to Alabama. They dominated Alabama on the offensive glass and got a bunch of putbacks and things because of it. That's how you win games like that, and that's how they play. But you look at it, a perfect storm, difficult matchup, and then quick turnaround. Those two things alone would have made that a difficult game. But then you throw the fact that you win in Kentucky, and then Tennessee hits a buzzer beater to beat Alabama, and all of a sudden your goal's accomplished. You're the SEC regular season champ. There's no tie. There's no nothing. Automatically then it's human nature. You relax and celebrate and enjoy it a little bit. And so I think all of those things factor into one. But Nathan went back to and looked, and Bruce Pearl, his comments from after Kentucky on Monday prior to Texas A&M, and he talked about, hey, it's a difficult matchup because they turn you over and they go to the offensive glass and they do a great job of it, and those are things we struggle with. It showed up. Bruce Pearl saw it. He saw the difficulty of that, and Auburn didn't respond. Does that mean that when these two teams play, if they were to play in Nashville, that Auburn couldn't win that game by 15? Absolutely not. But in that situation, everything played into Texas A&M's hands because they're already going to be playing like their hair was on fire. It was senior night. So the energy, all those things, it added to what they already do. If they had been a team that shoots a bunch of threes, and sometimes the energy doesn't help those things. It helps you when you want to be a rebounding team. And I thought they played really well. Auburn played okay, shot it okay. But you're not going to beat a team when they have 15 more shots than you do.
Yeah, just the basic mathematics of it. 24 offensive rebounds for Texas A&M and 29 second chance points. We'll get into a bit of the rebounding topic for Auburn. Yeah, you mentioned it. Like, it was senior night. Wade Taylor was going for the scoring record. This team had lost 4 straight games. Texas A&M they're playing the number 1 team in the country. Like, it's just, there was a lot going on that you definitely could have predicted an Auburn loss there. Talking about something that Auburn does need to tighten up on. Now, I don't think the level of concern from that game for me is not high. Number one, basketball is a sport about totality. Look at what Auburn has done this entire season, and even going from this game to Alabama, like, Auburn's gotten up for these huge games this season. I have no question that they are going to play well on Saturday back in front of their home crowd on their own senior day. But talking about the rebound, you and I were talking the day after this Texas A&M game. It's one thing to be like A&M is the best offensive rebounding team in the country, which they are, but 24 offensive boards, that's the most A&M's had all season in a game. So it's, you can say, oh, they're really good at it, but like, they did it against you better than anybody has. And for Auburn on the defensive glass, It wasn't a problem against Kentucky because you were just so good everywhere else. But as you pointed out to me, Dylan Caldwell and Chaney Johnson in this game against A&M combined for exactly 1 defensive rebound. Not a lot of defensive rebound. I believe 16 defensive rebounds, what you said, between Texas A&M and the Kentucky games. And so, again, not an overwhelming, number, not an overwhelming amount of concern necessarily. But as you're looking to improve and you want to improve, if you're going to win a title, you're going to go to the Final Four, whatever, you need to improve every single day. That is certainly something Bruce Pearl and his staff are trying to work on right now.
Right. I mean, even you look at some games where, I mean, you think about Kentucky and Alabama are 2 games that come to mind where you go, man, you played really well, you won those games. And you go back and look and you go, Alabama out-rebounded Auburn 49-40. Kentucky out-rebounded Auburn by 14, I believe, last Saturday. Auburn is good enough at every other position. They can overcome those things normally, but you're not going to overcome them when their offensive rebounds to that level. And we saw, Florida made shots early, which was a big part of that game earlier in the season. But, we talked about it before the year. I said, look, we said, look, Florida and Texas A&M are the 2 most difficult matchups for this team because of the way they play. It's different. A&M has a bunch of Dennis Rodman guys. They don't have a bunch of 7-footers, but they're really active in what they do. They beat Auburn to the punch. One of those teams looked like they were sluggish. The other one didn't. And so, that happens. But that's the way they play. For Auburn, can you get back to doing those things? And I mean, yeah, Alabama, can you keep them from making a bunch of threes outside? That's going to be huge, but you can't give them extra possessions. And that's going to be a big part of this thing. So this is a game where Auburn has an advantage in the paint. And you better have that advantage both ways, not just scoring the basketball. You better have it in rebounding too. But it's going to be a battle. There's no question about that because Alabama's playing to try to get a huge win to jump back up on a 1 line if Florida were to falter. Auburn's secure. I don't think there's any question about that. But for Alabama, there's still a whole lot left to play for. You don't want to get swept either, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I did a podcast today with our Bama 247 site, and Cody Goodwin brought up a good point. If you're Nate Oates, you can play pretty freely. Again, you're already locked up in terms of a double bye for the SEC tournament. Obviously, the SEC championship is not within your grasp at all, and you're going on the road where Alabama has played better this season. Like, Auburn has played better on the road or away from home than they have. Like, what's Auburn's best home performance this season? Probably the Ole Miss game. They didn't play very well against Tennessee, but they were able to pull that one out. Didn't play very well against Florida. Didn't play very well against Arkansas. Didn't play very, very well against Georgia. And so Alabama has been much to that effect. They have been a better team on the road this season. And Nate Oates is telling them, hey, let's go spoil it. Let's go have some fun and go spoil their senior night and try to get one back for them winning in Tuscaloosa earlier this season. Yeah, I mean, Buzz Williams talked about it after Tuesday night's game. He said, look, it looks better when you're making shots. He was talking about the way they play and their system. It's A&M, that was their best 3-point shooting performance in an SEC home game all season. They make 41% of their threes. And so that was another element of it. Like you and I were looking, or I was talking about last year's game against Texas A&M. They had 19 offensive rebounds against Auburn in that game. Yep. What was the difference? They went 3 of 20 from deep. And so it's just, it's when you're a defensive, physical rebounding team and you add, like, and it started early, they led by 10, you add kind of a consistent.
They were able to freely go into that game because of the early lead. And then not having Denver Jones, I think, added to it because of the extra possessions. Then that's where that secondary defense kicks in a little bit because of the kickbacks and some of those things. They're able to get into a rhythm a little bit. And Auburn made some runs, but could never get over the hump because they couldn't stifle A&M's possessions because of the offensive rebounds.
Looking to Saturday now, it's not 1 versus 2 like it was last time. It's still a top 10 matchup in Neville Arena. Auburn will go for the season sweep over Alabama. You mentioned Denver Jones. That's a big deal in this game, and it's an intriguing position to be in because Bruce Pearl said it after the Texas A&M game. He said it's not like Auburn was saving him. Like if he could have played, he would have played in that game. Is he going to be able to go against Alabama? I think that's a really big key because you look at how good he was in Tuscaloosa. I mean, hit some 3-pointers to give Auburn, to extend that lead, but it was his defense. I mean, Mark Sears went 2 of 11 from deep. Alabama went only 5 of 26 from deep in that game. I'm not saying it was all Denver Jones, but he was the national Naismith Player of the Week, or I believe the Oscar Robertson Player of the Week after that for a reason. And they missed him. They missed him on defense against Texas A&M. It's not just, hey, go defend the opposing point guard. It's the fact that you have that guy spearheading things for you on defense, and everyone else can just kind of follow suit and follow his lead. He's Auburn's best backcourt defender for a reason, and so having him again on Saturday, I think would be really, really big. I think if he can't go, that's a big up. That's a big plus for Alabama in this game, because I don't think Alabama's going to shoot 5 of 26 from deep again. I just don't. They've shot better away from home than they have at home this season. I don't see Mark Sears. Mark Sears has been on a tear since that Auburn game. I think he's going to be better, and so you combine those couple of things. They're a better shooting team on the road, and Mark Sears has been playing better. If Auburn doesn't have Denver Jones, I think that's a really big factor in this game. At the same time, I know what Bruce Pearl said, but I'm not pushing Denver Jones if he's not 100%, because this isn't the NCAA tournament yet. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that one.
Yeah, it will be, because you're right. You look at it and you've got a guy that says, look, I'm just going to go try to take over. And it's crazy to watch what Mark Sears has done. Now it hadn't been necessarily all shooting threes, because he's a guy that gets to the free throw line a ton. He shot 209 free throws this season, which is wild. But you look at it and, coming into that Auburn game, I think they had played, he had 11. He had a scoreless game, but he had 11 and 17, some of those things. I think he's had 3 30-point games since then, and a couple of in the mid-20s. He has said, look, I'm going to take this thing over. We've seen less minutes for Aiden Holloway because of that. Mark Sears is playing 35 minutes a game. And so LeBaron Philon's a guy that is playing more, and obviously is a guy that's he's a difficult matchup too, because of his ability to get into the lane. But yeah, I think, you need Denver Jones, and, we'll see at this one. Thankfully, for Auburn, it wasn't a bone bruise. It was a soft tissue. So now, can you get the strength that you need to be back? Playing on Tuesday gives you an extra day, which is a big deal. And then, you don't play again until next Friday. So, this is one where you're like, hey, maybe not as worried about it being sore, as long as you can go and get it ready to go on game day. You don't have to worry about it being sore, because you could have till Wednesday to get back and get ready to go. So I think that's a big deal for Auburn. Yeah, he's absolutely an important part of this one. And, we saw him go a little deeper on the bench in A&M. We saw Ja'Kai Howard in there earlier, and we saw, Turler, Chris Moore a little bit. How do you handle this? Because Alabama's they got a bunch of guys. They got a bunch of bodies. They play too. Do both teams maybe go, we're going to start to get an NCAA tournament feel for this and start to shorten and prepare for that? May not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and you mentioned what Mark Sears has been able to do. Obviously, Alabama's lost 4 of its last 6, but he's sort of just put that cape on for them. And I think their question right now is who is going to join him, who is going to help them right now. Grant Nelson was kind of supposed to be that guy. Grant Nelson has not been very good this season. I think he was like a -18 when they played Auburn. And you mentioned how Auburn should have an advantage in the paint in this game. Janai Broome has been a little slowed down the last couple games, and I think that is, naturally, like, it's not breaking news to say, hey, the National Player of the Year contender needs to get going in order for Auburn to be at its best. But it's been interesting, Jason. It's been interesting to see how teams, Kentucky, number one, Amari Williams is really good, so he was able to go against him one-on-one. But they had an interesting game plan early. They wouldn't double. They would kind of just poke, have a guard poke, and then back off. Maybe throw off his dribble, make Janai pick up his dribble and start again. All that stuff matters for a guy who has to play in a rhythm, for a finesse post player. And then I thought against A&M, and this is even separate from the shoulder issue, that he went to the bench, was able to play like 35 minutes in that game, but Bruce Pearl said, hey, it may be affecting him. And so that's another guy you want healthy. I thought he was a little rushed in that game. The double teams would come from A&M, and he would still put up a shot. And that's not something we're used to seeing from Janai Broome. And so I think, again, needless to say, Auburn would like Janai Broome to be playing well, but this is a game where he was dominant against Alabama last time. They don't have a ton of physicality on the interior. If you're Auburn, you would definitely, and Jani Broome against Alabama in his Auburn career has been really, really good over the course of nearly 3 seasons now. You would love to see him get going. Number one, to win this game, but number two, if Broome's rolling going into the postseason, usually that's going to mean good things for Auburn.
Yeah, Alabama has a couple of big guys that they haven't performed very well. I won't be shocked to see them try to be really physical Saturday. And if you give up some fouls, then you give up fouls. But I won't be surprised to see that be the case Saturday. We're going to attack and do some of those things and make Broome earn it. This is where you're right. The early season 6 assists, 7 assists, Jani Broome. We saw it in Tuscaloosa with some lobs to Dylan Caldwell. That's how you get teams away from that. And so I think that will be a big sign early. Can you find the open guy, cutters to the lane? Because you can take the ball to the basket against this Alabama team, especially if Jani Broome is taking their bigs away from the rim. And so I think, to me, that's going to be a big key for this team is can Jani Broome, if Alabama says, hey, we're going to keep doing the same things. We're going to be physical and we're going to try to drive you off the post, then find the open guys. That's been a key to success for Auburn this season, has been sharing the basketball. And when they don't play their best, obviously sometimes you share it and they don't make shots. And so the assist numbers go down anyway. But you can see there's sometimes it looks a little different.
I will say for this is Jani Broome's first time all season that he scored in single digits in consecutive games. I will say for that fact, the play of Auburn's guards, I think this is something we've been talking about for years. Is like Auburn's got to get better guard play in March. This is the group to do it. Chad Baker-Mazar is 59% from deep over his last 3 games. He was even in a weird role. He might do that again against Alabama, depending on Denver Jones playing point guard. It looked pretty natural for him. They just lost him a couple times because you're not used to just handing the ball back to the point guard. He can shoot a 3 right then and there. Tahad Pettiford, he was Auburn's best player against Texas A&M, 6 of 10 from deep. And then Miles Kelly had an off shooting night against A&M, but you can't ignore 30 points against Kentucky. So especially if Denver Jones is back, I think Auburn's in a good position to feel good about their guard play in March. And if you add Jani Broome to that, I mean, it's going to make them pretty unstoppable. But I was just thinking about that the other day because that's been a storyline for years for this team, really ever since Bryce Brown and Jared Harper left, was how can Auburn get better guard play in the month of March? Because it's been kind of iffy. This looks like if they keep trending this way, this looks like the group to do it, because obviously that's so important for carrying you through the tournament.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think the other part of it too, Miles Kelly got to the free throw line 10 times. We've seen him rebound. He is becoming a complete player, which is a big deal for this team. Now you got to get your other big guys. I mentioned Dylan and Chaney. Those guys have to do the other things. Sometimes you're not going to get a bunch of touches. Chaney is a guy that when he gets touches normally has done a pretty good job, but he also disappears and you look up and there's a couple of games where there's just nothing there. They got to get him at a minimum to be a 6-7 rebound guy. Him and Dylan Caldwell both. You look up Saturday, and those two guys need to have 12 rebounds between them. You need to get that from those guys and go, okay, whatever else you give us is gravy, but you got to get us the basketball. And so for me, I look at the keys for moving forward for this team, and those two guys, you look the rest of the way out, they don't need to have games where Dylan and Chaney combine and have 3 rebounds. That's not going to be the recipe for this team to be really successful. Now, you still win, and we've seen this team win that way. But on the night where maybe you don't shoot it as well and you turn it over a few times, those are the plays that keep you in front and keep you winning games, and they got to make those kind of plays. Yeah,
Alabama's not the offensive rebounding. I mean, nobody is like A&M. They're not as physically tenacious, but they are top 30 in the country in offensive rebounding. Lots of long rebounds from all their 3-point attempts, and so they can get a lot of second chance opportunities. And I think for Auburn, just cutting off the water after one shot, because it's not the same game plan as A&M where they you get 15 more shots off offensive rebounds. But Nate Oates does like to play those mathematics of just like, we're going to take more shots than you, and therefore the numbers dictate that we're going to score more points than you just because we end up taking more shots. That was what was one of the really impressive parts about their win in Tuscaloosa, was like making Alabama slow down, making them play in the half court, keeping them out of transition, getting rebounds, not letting them hit 3-point shots, just really kind of playing the style Auburn wanted to. If Auburn grinds this thing to a half court game again, I think they'll have a really good opportunity to win. Should be a good one. Should be a good one on Saturday. I mean, this I know that the stakes aren't there anymore from a championship perspective. Like maybe we looked at the beginning of the regular season and thought, could this game like be for the title? Obviously, that's not the case anymore, but I still expect this to be the best crowd Auburn has had all season, which would be saying something because Tennessee was incredible after College game day. But LeBaron Fowler maybe, but Aiden Holloway, obviously that's going to be something.
We'll Mark Sears is a guy that play a bunch. I mean, there's going to be plenty of guys to draw the attention for the Auburn crowd on Saturday. Yeah, no, I think it'll be a great atmosphere. And you're right. There's not a whole lot left for either team, but there are still things and when you put your fate in the hands of a committee, you just don't know. And if you're Auburn, you go, okay, well, if you were to lose to Texas A&M, you lose to Alabama at home, and then you lose, on Friday in games that it might bump you. You're not going to bump off a 1 line, but it might bump you from being a 1 or a 2 because it shouldn't. I'm not saying it should, but you're still dealing with human beings. And a win Saturday, and it's done, in my opinion. I don't think there's any question. But yeah, you could leave some things up for a little bit of doubt, even though there's none. I mean, you look and this league is going to get what it is because it's the best league in the country by a mile. And you look and you go, Florida's only one of the top 5 teams that hasn't lost this week, and they lost last week. That's how difficult it is to play in this league. And I think basketball people understand that. Will ADs and some of the folks on a committee care that Duke hasn't had to play really anybody significant? Now, North Carolina's playing better, but it's a terrible matchup because they don't really play physical basketball a ton. Duke's got to go to the Dean Dome Saturday. That'll be, since Clemson, the only challenge they've had in this entire regular season other than Louisville in their whole league, which is amazing.
Yeah, the threat is not for Auburn to be not be a number 1 seed. I think that was locked up like probably 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. It's number 1 overall. And will that matter? We'll see. As
long as you get South, Lexington, Atlanta, as long as you get that, whether you're the overall number 1 or not, that to me that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter. I think for my money, I've been saying I thought me personally, but I'm not a bracketologist or whatever, but I thought your win at Kentucky, I was like, that's it. You're number 1 overall. Like no one is going to catch they're not going to catch your resume. They're not even going to come close. But you brought up a good point when you and I were talking this week. The history of someone like Duke playing well at the end of a season, how does that play into a committee's eyes? If they continue to look awesome, if Cooper Flagg ends up being the player of the year and just it continues to do what he's doing. But like we just said, it probably, unless Duke decides to take the South, which they historically will not, they have a massive alumni base up a little bit further on the East Coast. And so should play into both teams' hands in terms of the South and the East region.
Yeah, and even like we're talking about it, even a computer model, somebody has to figure out the dynamics of things to look for that are important for those things to happen. And you look at the net rankings right now, and Duke's 1. Duke's 1 in the net, Auburn's a 2, even though Auburn has 21 quad 1 and quad 2 wins, Duke has 11. Auburn's 15-3 in quad 1, Duke's 6-3. And you start going, okay, well, Auburn is 14-2 in road and neutral site games, and Duke's 10-3. And you go, all of those metrics scream this thing isn't close, but yet in the net, Duke still won because of margin of victory and some of these things that factor in. That's why just looking at those things is just a portion of it, and you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, another sort of underlying. There's lots of storylines going on at the same time. Even once Auburn even though they've locked up the SEC outright, lots of things to pay attention to. I think this time, when it comes to Monday, Bruce Pearl, I think it's Monday or Tuesday when they do the SEC awards. Janai Broom has been the SEC Player of the Year for a long time now. He'll be the first since that '99 team. And then Bruce Pearl should win his second SEC. Maybe. I think
I don't know that he does. I don't know that he
Yeah.
does. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Cam Newton not winning, the SEC Athlete of the Year. They gave it to a tennis player. I wouldn't be shocked to see, now Vanderbilt losing at home to Arkansas might knock them a little bit there.
Yeah.
To me, that was the only other one that I looked at when in this league, maybe Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
I feel it should be a runaway that Bruce Pearl is Coach of the Year. Vandy was the one, but losing at home to Arkansas might have knocked that a little bit.
Yeah, and Bruce obviously should be one of the 2 or 3 able to win National Coach of the Year as well. And so
I think you look at Rick Pitino and then Coach of Louisville. To me, though, it's those 3 guys I would think would be the National Coach of the Year candidates.
Yep, I would definitely agree. We will see what happens in the basketball Iron Bowl rematch on Saturday. I wanted to close out here and talk a little bit of spring football. We've still got a ways to go.
Yeah,
Jason. I mean, we're sitting here on March 6th. It's going to be a grind to get there until spring practice. Luckily, of course, Auburn basketball is tremendous, and we're looking forward to them going into the postseason. But you have a series that's still ongoing at Auburn Undercover right now for our subscribers. You were able to sit down with Auburn defensive coordinator DJ Durkin and talk about lots of different things. Obviously, it was such a big deal for Auburn to keep him on their staff. I think it would not be outlandish to say he might have been the best coach on this staff last year, and did great things with a young group that played so many freshmen. Now those players are a year older. They made some moves in the portal. Tell me a little bit about your conversation with Durkin and some of the things he wanted to touch on and kind of where his mind is at going into his second season at Auburn.
Yeah, I think that's one of the first things was I wanted to kind of go, hey, how big of a deal is it to get to year number 2? We've talked about it. Auburn hasn't had that luxury in a while on either side of the ball to have a coordinator for a second season. And it's a big deal that you have both offense and defenses back for a second year. The interesting part is you're doing it with a bunch of new players. So he said it's very different than it used to be when you said, oh, we know we got 4 guys coming back at each position and they've been in the system. Well, now you go, well, we got 2 freshmen and a transfer at each one of these positions to go along with 1 guy or maybe 2 guys. So he said relationships still matter, but it's a different type now. And I agree with him. He said, look, now they're spending as much time as they can with these guys, whether it be, workout, bring them in and talk or whatever, because getting to know them, what they understand, what they know is going to be really important when you get on the field for the spring and trying to figure out what guys can do. Something I talked about today is versatility. And he is a huge proponent of versatility. It's interesting that one of the guys he brought up was Keldrick Falk. And he talked about how important his versatility is for this defense. And people have wondered, he's listed now at 270 pounds, which isn't small, but he was a lot bigger than that going into last year. I do think he trimmed down as the season went along, which is normally the case. We saw him become a really good pass rusher. I think, and I won't be surprised if we see Keldrick Falk and Auburn maybe stand up 2 guys at ends at times and have him playing as a big outside linebacker. And the comparison I've had for him since I saw him in high school was Julius Peppers. And I think about Julius Peppers being a guy that was about that size and had the long reach, but he had the ability to turn the corner. We didn't see as much of that from Keldrick as a freshman as we did last year. We saw him turn the corner a little more and be more physical. Now you trim down a little more. I think you add the pass rush ability, but at 270, he's still big enough on third downs to play inside if you need him, to give you more speed on the field. So the versatility of a guy like Keldrick Falk is big. And then the versatility on the back end. We've seen that already. But you look at the numbers of guys they have in the secondary and guys that can play multiple positions. And we've seen Champ Anthony be kind of the guy that really did that until his injury last year. He went from being a nickel to Auburn's best corner in that short time we saw him before he got injured. But you bring back, Jay Crawford and Kay Lee outside and Kinsley Faustin inside. And, we've seen the versatility of Sylvester Smith and Caleb Harris and those guys. Now all of a sudden you add some potential really versatile guys with Rayon Strader and then Blake Woodby and Donovan Starr. But then Anquan Fagans may be the poster child for versatility in the secondary coming in from Thompson, a guy that can play the nickel, can play both safety spots, can play corner. And then Eric Winters is a bigger safety that can do some of those things too. Versatility is going to be huge. And so you talked about that. And then something I'll probably write about for Friday was him talking about his linebacker group. It's not a big group at the moment. We expect them to probably try to add somebody after the spring, an older guy, but he really likes what he's seen from Robert Woodyard. Robert Woodyard has been the guy that stuck around, continued to work, continued to play. And little by little, we saw him more last year than we've seen him ever since he's been at Auburn. And now he's taking on a little bit of leadership role. And him and DeMarcus Riddick, I would say going into the spring would be the two guys that I would say would be the favorites at linebacker. And I think it's going to be fun to watch those guys. So, yeah, there was a lot of that. And then newcomers, defensive line. How do you, I guess, test, but see where they are, but also get guys ready. It's a double reality now in this is that, 15 years ago, you had, 5 true freshman defensive linemen coming in. You're going, hopefully one of those guys will be able to give us some help. Now you're going, we absolutely need 2 of those guys to play a lot. And can we get 4 of them ready to help us? That's the reality now. So that's why I think you've seen this extended lead-up period in the weight room and more chalk talk. So those guys, when you get on the field in the spring, hey, here's what we're doing. Give us 4 concepts this week that we're going to try to get down. And then you go, so try to get as much of the playbook in as possible in that short window that you're on the field in the spring. So really good stuff. Hope people are enjoying it, and have a little bit more from him tomorrow. So,
yeah, for sure. Like I said, our subscribers have definitely been enjoying that. So a nice message here. Be sure to, if you're not subscribed to Auburn Undercover, definitely head over there. I believe we will have if not now, which it's not now, we'll probably have a promo for the tournament. If we don't have one planned, I'll make sure that we do, because obviously there'll be a lot of excitement. But yeah, I mean, Keldrick Falk, when you look at those, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the updated heights and weights, measurables.
270.
Okay, so he was down like 17 pounds. Now, like you said, like that was just from the beginning of last season.
Yeah, and that's probably from spring last year. I think by the time we got to the season last year, he was probably 275 or so. So it's not that much difference. It looks good. And another thing about Keldrick, he said, look, he's really taken on a leadership role. And we know Keldrick, and he's not the most outgoing, loud. This is not Eugene Asante personality. But when you're able to lead on the field and lead by example, and you start to take on more of that vocal role, boy, it really hits home. And I think Keldrick's doing more of that this spring. So,
speaking of Eugene Asante, really quick before we get out of here, did want to touch on the NFL Combine, which wrapped up over the weekend, because this was something you and I had talked about. Like, this was an important. Sometimes it doesn't matter for certain prospects, but for Auburn, for a few of their guys, this was like, hey, you can do some stuff here, similar to the Senior Bowl. I think Eugene Asante continues to, we were there at the Senior Bowl. We had heard he had a great week. He looked really good. He ends up getting the #1 athleticism score among linebackers at the Combine. I've got my recap pulled up here, but I know his 40-yard dash was second out of 16 linebackers that did the 40. We could have told you that. I mean, I don't know if the news that fast, but I mean, guy just flies all over the field. His 10-yard split drill was also first among all the linebackers. And so combined with the fact that, his interviews were dynamite. I mean,
100%.
Everyone who would have met him there is gonna fall in love with him. But also, Jason, a good weekend for Jarquez Hunter and Keandre Lambert-Smith. If I had told you Jarquez Hunter was going to have the second most bench reps among running backs, that probably would not have surprised you very much at all. A pretty good 40-yard dash for Jarquez Hunter, 9th out of the 24 running backs. Yeah, like that's, for a guy like him who's not all about speed, being in the top half is pretty nice. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith. This was a guy that you and I had talked about. It was kind of confusing why he hadn't shown up on draft boards.
The craziness that why he wasn't at the Senior Bowl didn't make any sense at all.
Correct. He runs a 4.37, which 10 years ago would have been like mind-blowing, but these dudes are so fast now. That was 7th among the wide receivers, but 40 wide receivers ran.
Correct.
So that top 25%.
Yeah, top 10. He was so productive and did a good job of being so consistent catching the football. And we knew that his speed, he made big plays at Penn State, and you knew long-term deep ball speed, he was good. but to do that in a 40 at a combine, I think it takes him to a level where teams go, look, that guy can absolutely be our number 2 wide receiver. And a number 2 wide receiver to me is 3rd, 4th round potential for some of these teams, because you're right, they're going to be some guy. I think he pushed himself into the middle of the draft by what he's done over the course of the last few weeks, in addition to being at the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, going into this thing, it was like Auburn pretty much had one guaranteed draft pick. Jarquez Hunter was a guy we knew was going to get drafted somewhere. It feels, if you had to bet, I'd say 3 guys. I'd say they get these 3 guys drafted. Eugene Asante, like I don't know how you're going to look at that combine, that Senior Bowl, and the fact that he's probably one of the best interviews in the draft class this year. I don't know how you're going to pass on that guy. So if Lambert Smith can get in there as well, could be 3 draftees. Jalen McLeod, I can't remember. I was trying to look it up. I don't know if he's dealing with a injury or not, or if he just didn't want to. We just wanted to wait until pro day, since he's doing this stuff out of position.
Probably going to do more pro day, I would guess. Yeah. The thing that jumps out to me about Jarquez and Eugene both is the ability to play special teams, and how that can be a separator. Jarquez played every special team. He'd run, carry the ball 8 times on a drive, score a touchdown, then he covered kickoffs. To me, as an NFL team, that's the guy I want. Now, numbers and all these things, there's going to be somebody that goes, look, I don't care. I want that dude on my team, and he's going to play NFL he's going to play in the league for a long time. So I would say, again, more probably 5th, 6th round for him, because running backs. But, there's more spots now, I think, because of what we've seen from running backs. We've seen kind of grow back a little bit. The running game become more important again. Yeah, I think him, and then Eugene Asante, nickel linebacker, special teams guy, put it 3rd down linebacker, I think has now put himself into that mix as well.
Yep, the draft is coming up on let's see,
middle of April, I think.
April 24th.
So later.
More toward the end of April, in Green Bay. So, wonder what the weather is like. Maybe get a little warmer there toward the end of April. So, Jalen McLeod. I mean, that's not surprising. I would not expect him to be drafted. It's just been kind of an odd process for him. They want him to be a stand-up linebacker. That's not really what he. It's not really what he does. But I do think he could get a shot in the league. At that position, he admitted to us at the Senior Bowl. He was like, "Yeah, I got a lot to learn with this kind of stuff." And so, appreciate everybody for tuning in today. I think we will go ahead and call it a wrap there on Thursday Night Live. For Jason Caldwell, I'm Nathan King. Like we talked about, keep it locked. AuburnUndercover.com. You can continue to read Jason's series with DJ Durkin, exclusive interview for our subscribers, and lots of basketball as well. Jason covered the Auburn baseball game last night. They fell to UAB in Birmingham. Jason will continue to have coverage of that group. Philip is covering softball, which is going to close up their non-conference schedule. Which
they actually start SEC this weekend. Yeah, they play Mississippi State, I think, this weekend. So they kind of kick theirs off, and so big start for them. I think they scored 12 runs in an inning.
They're 20-1, I think, right?
20-1, playing really well, and now you get the challenge of facing I think 4 straight ranked teams to start your SEC play, which is it's life in the SEC now, and it's life in the SEC in every sport. But yep, so the Auburn opens against Mississippi State in Starkville Friday at 5 o'clock or Saturday at 5 o'clock. So that's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday series.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's crazy to me how fast. Especially softball, because they can pack in so many games.
Play 6 games in a weekend. You look up and you play 21 games already. Yeah,
they had played 11 games, I think, in their first 3 or 4 days of the season. And so already getting to that point. And then, of course, basketball this weekend. Excited to, Jason will be there. Patrick will be there as well. It'll be senior day. They're going to win or lose. They're cutting down the nets to celebrate an SEC title afterwards. And so videos and pictures and coverage and all that stuff. Really excited. And then it'll be full steam ahead to the postseason. So thank you guys so much for joining us here on Thursday Night Live. Thank you once again to our sponsor, AU Club, for sponsoring